The beauty of everything that happens from a MoneyGram perspective or any remittance company is that while it looks like the money is moving real time, nothing actually moves real time, right? It's all just messaging that happens, and the actual settlement itself is done maybe a day later, maybe 2 days later, maybe 3 days later.
Yeah.
And in traditional payments, there's nothing different from that. Like even when you pay for your coffee at a coffee shop, that coffee shop owner doesn't actually get paid till maybe a day or two later, right? And so this is the speed at which traditional payments move. It looks like it's instant. The customer feels like everything happened instantaneously, but the actual movement of the asset is usually a day or two behind.
Hello guys, and welcome to a brand new episode brought to you by Congape TV. I am Solange Arrasi. I'll be your host for today's episode, and I have a very special guest with me today to discuss many topics related to blockchain, his journey, and what brought him to this world. I have Luther Maday. He's my guest in today's episode. Welcome, Luther, and thank you for giving us this exclusive interview to Congape TV. Today, Luther, let me introduce him quickly. He is the leader in fintech and blockchain strategy and innovation at MoneyGram previously, where he launched several initiatives around blockchain and digital currency adoption, making cross-border payments faster and more accessible. Now he is serving as the head of payments at Algorand Foundation. We will dive into his journey, the future of digital payments, and what lies ahead in this evolving and fast-moving world of blockchain and this ecosystem in specific, and other topics related to this subject. So keep on watching us. So first, you had, Luther, a very interesting journey and a very interested career transition, moving from a global payment leader, MoneyGram, and then landing at Algorand Foundation. Tell me more details about this exciting journey and your story.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. And so if you look at my career, it actually starts in traditional payments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is definitely or defined as merchant services, so the art and all the science that goes behind the payments that's involved in once you tap your card or you swipe your card or however you pay for that online or offline, and everything that has to deal with the movement of payments and assets that happens on the back end. That actually then went on to more into like cross-border money movement, both wholesale money movement, and then eventually with MoneyGram, where MoneyGram is known for allowing people to move assets from one part of the world to the other. The beauty of everything that happens from a MoneyGram perspective or any remittance company is that while it looks like the money is moving real time, nothing actually moves real time, right? It's all just messaging that happens, and the actual settlement itself is done maybe a day later, maybe 2 days later, maybe 3 days later.
Yeah.
And in traditional payments, there's nothing different from that. Like even when you pay for your coffee at a coffee shop, that coffee shop owner doesn't actually get paid till maybe a day or two later, right? And so this is the speed at which traditional payments move. It looks like it's instant. The customer feels like everything happened instantaneously, but the actual movement of the asset is usually a day or two behind, right? So one of the things that I was focused on with MoneyGram was helping them migrate some of their traditional remittance services to using digital assets. And this was USDC at that time on Stellar. And that actually enabled them to now provide their customers with a mechanism to not only just like move assets, but to hold assets as well. So they're actually MoneyGram is launching a non-custodial wallet pretty soon. And that non-custodial wallet allows users to hold USDC, which means that you can be a person that lives probably in Argentina, never set foot in the US, and now you can actually hold a US dollar coin by Circle in a wallet provided by MoneyGram. And that was revolutionary from that perspective. The other thing that I was focused on from a MoneyGram perspective was allowing a large entity, a cross-border entity like MoneyGram, to do treasury management, as in like settle with their customers or settle with their agents or settle with themselves using digital assets. So when I saw these two aspects of how powerful something like a USDC or a digital coin or a stable coin is, and how much leverage and how much freedom it gives an entity, that's when I kind of started to think about, I want to go deeper into this space. So that's actually what kind of provoked me to say, okay, I've been in traditional payments for so long. I've had the pleasure and the honor of moving from merchant services to cross-border money movement, and then moving from cross-border money movement using traditional assets to cross-border money movement using digital assets. And so when the opportunity came up with Algorand, I was like, this is a perfect way for me to actually delve further into the world of digital assets and then layer one blockchains.
Interesting. So you mentioned that at MoneyGram you worked on bridging, let's say, the gap between the traditional finance and the blockchain. How do you see the blockchain exactly, and specifically transforming cross-border payments? I mean, for underbanked populations, for how do you fit at Algorand Foundation with this vision, and how do you support this matter in specific?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Solange. When it comes to, if you look at most of the world, right, it's actually really interesting because the underbanked and unbanked, while it's growingly smaller, there's still a significant part of the population that cannot either participate in a traditional financial,
and they don't
system,
have access to it.
and they don't have access to it.
Yeah,
right?
like yesterday I was hosting one of my guests. He was telling me like there's a specific percentage, and which is very very big relevantly. They don't have still bank accounts.
Yeah, and they don't have bank accounts, and this is the other thing that I think people don't realize when you live in like either a Western world or a developed economy like we are here, where you actually don't even, it's not just the bank accounts, but even if you did have a bank account, you don't have access to investments, right? You don't have a way to even grow your wealth. Forget holding your wealth. Now, if you did hold your wealth somewhere, you can actually grow your wealth. And I think that's really where blockchains as a whole, and more interestingly, digital assets that work on blockchains, are able to easily make it borderless from that perspective and reduce the actual friction of allowing somebody to actually be able to participate in a financial system of some sorts. I think, quite often when people think about like digital ledgers or blockchains or crypto in general, there's still a certain amount of negative connotation that people kind of attribute to that. And I think that's more so from the past, but if you really look at how well the systems of today, and like if you take partners of ours like Coinbase, or partners of ours like that are doing some really amazing stuff that are in the blockchain space, they're doing it in a well-regulated way, right? So it's not some Wild West thing. It is providing customers across the globe access to digital assets that are borderless, and still making it to where they are AML KYC'd, we know who they are, they know who they are, and it's well regulated from that perspective. So from that perspective, it's applying the same regulations as a bank would, without the restrictions of the borders or something like that from that perspective.
How do you access markets having conflict, like we call them conflict zones, countries where war is happening and it's a bit chaotic? How do you cope with this market? How do you access it?
This is actually a fantastic question because I have two great examples for you. I'm going to start from Algorand. I'm going to move backwards. Okay. So Algorand, one of the key partners and one of the key wallets that actually operates in the Algorand ecosystem is this wallet called Hesab, HESAB Pay, right? And why we absolutely love them.
Hesab in Arabic called my account.
Perfect.
Similar to my account.
So that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's perfect. And one of the things that they do is they have actually developed an amazing financial instrument that operates on blockchain using a local stablecoin, and it actually in Afghanistan, right? So in Afghanistan, where things are still tough, and so even in places like that, they're able to provide locals with a very easy way to accept funds from like organizations like the UNDP, accept funds, be able to like operate it, and then be able to pay local store owners, etc., for goods and services, and even do bill payments. Like, so you have people receiving funds from the UN into their Hesab wallet, being able to go either pick up cash or pay for something that's an actual physical good, or paying for actual like electricity and things, right? And so that really wouldn't be possible
Is
without.
there any limit in specific when it comes to amounts, like moving them and dealing with it with this specific amount?
I think the limits.
Receiving, paying.
The limits are rarely ever on the on-chain side, so it's not within the blockchain ecosystem, right?
Okay.
The limits usually come on the on and off ramp side. And depending on the on and off ramp that particular person chooses to do, there are certain limits, right, from that perspective. There is actually a very similar program that also happens that I was lucky to be part of on the Stellar MoneyGram side as well, right? And so there was an amazing work that was done with the Ukrainian refugees during when that war broke out, where the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, was able to distribute funds to an actual wallet in USDC, same kind of asset, right? And then people were able to, like, first of all, not have to worry about carrying something of value with you, like, because some of these people are still in transit, right? So they were leaving Ukraine, they were probably going to go to Romania, they're probably going to still go on further out, and they didn't have to worry about things getting stolen from them, right? They didn't have to, because this wasn't a physical thing, this was something that was sitting on their phone, and they, were able to easily control that. And then because of the way that the on and off ramps were set up, in that case, it was MoneyGram, they could go to any MoneyGram location and be able to pick up cash, right? So both these examples make it a really obvious tool of choice for aid organizations, because this is actually what a lot of people don't know, is that in order to make funds, like actual cash, available, the process is actually pretty antiquated, right? So when aid organizations try to do that, they literally will get pallets of cash from a bank. They put it on a plane with armed guard, and
It's
they actually
hard to move it.
Yeah, and it's actually literal cash that they move with armed guard and everything, right? So think about the amount of manpower, the amount of logistics, the planning that goes into all that, quickly replaced by the fact that now you can do it with just like USDC and a digital asset, right? And it's very simple. And the real trick there is the availability of the off-ramps. As long as there's good off-ramps for those recipients of aid, then really, like, everything works really seamlessly.
So what are the real challenges that you are facing? I mean, your presence is solving a lot of problems and it's helping and supporting people, but I'm sure there's a lot of other challenges that you're facing and how you overcome them.
Yeah, it's there's I usually classify challenges from a blockchain or a digital asset perspective into kind of two categories. One is just volume and liquidity. At the end of the day, the reason why our traditional markets operate so efficiently, even though they use really inefficient methods of movement, right? For example, banks shut down at like 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, right? They don't open till 9 o'clock in the morning. But still, the entire global economic systems are able to still operate. The reason why they're able to operate is because there's so much cash that's pumped, like liquidity that's available in the system, that it allows for things to still move, even though there's not actual movement for 2 business days, right? That liquidity is ultimately that'll solve the usage crisis from a blockchain perspective, because till you have more and more liquidity, you really can't be able to solve for like the fact that when you receive some kind of stable asset, doesn't matter if it's Bitcoins, doesn't matter if it's USDC, you really can't like do something with it or off ramp it effectively. And the reason for that is the lack of liquidity in this space, right? So I think over time, as we see more liquidity, as in more volumes, more connections into the TradFi space, for the conversion of digital assets to traditional assets, or just like, if you could walk into a grocery store today and be able to pay with some kind of digital asset, all those things will ultimately solve for that liquidity piece, right? So that's one classification. The other side of it is just, and this is something that evolves over time, is also just the regulations, right? Like, so when you look at the global nature of how regulations are available today, it's, you have, to one extreme, you have amazing regulators like VARA and ADGM who are doing some amazing work and making it very clear for participants to say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and this is when this, in the classification of what you can do, this is exactly how you do it, right? Like, it's very clear. They've done amazing work of documenting everything. You've got other amazing regulators like EBA and them who've put out MiCA in Europe. And then, on the other side, you've got other regulators across the globe that haven't really made it clear on do they support digital assets? Well, if they do, how do they classify them? Are they securities? Are they not securities, right? So I think this lack of clarity on a global scale for a tool that operates globally makes it very challenging.
How you're making your business more user friendly? I mean, in a lot of areas in the world, still people, they don't have access to technology and they don't have this smart mobile that we have here. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we are privileged, we have this luxury of technology and easy access to technology. In other countries, still back to the war zone, to the conflict areas, they don't have this privilege. How you're making your platform, your business more user friendly to this specific people and group of people?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, when people ask me or ask us about like user friendliness, if you take a blockchain ecosystem as a whole, I think what people actually witness and see or think that they're interacting with is just the retail side of it, right? But as a blockchain, what you're trying to actually grow is the ecosystem of applications that are built on the blockchain. Like, because it's a network effect, right? It's just like when you have Uber, like if you just have a bunch of drivers and not enough riders, the drivers are not happy, right? Because not enough people are taking rides. If you have very few drivers, but you have a bunch of riders, then the riders are not happy because they're waiting forever for a driver to show up, right? So almost all these kind of fall into the same equation of in the space of blockchains, that is replaced by people building applications
Yes.
and people using applications, right? So both those have to grow at an equal pace in order for the blockchain or that particular environment to thrive over time. The reason why I'm kind of answering you from that perspective is that one set of users that we want to make it very easy for is developers. Because when developers are able to easily come into the ecosystem and build, that means that more developers come, and then developers take less time building things and they can launch faster. One of the things that we did is we actually made our code base, our APIs Python dependent. So anybody that knows Python, which is tons of developers, can easily code to Algorand's ecosystem now. That was one key step that we took. Our CTO, John Wood, did an amazing job from leading from that initiative, and that we have an amazing team that's kind of made the transformation. The other thing that you asked about is from a user perspective, right? So not just the developers, but the users. That user's ability to easily do something really comes from the developers, right? Because the developers are the ones who dictate the user experience and the user interface from that perspective. But having said that, I want to go back to the Hisape example, because Hisape, and I'm happy to share like a video with you guys after this, but like they actually have a way for people that have feature phones, not smartphones, but you know, like the old phones where you have to hit a button 3 times to get a letter in there. Like
Yes.
they can actually use those phones to do a on-chain transaction using SMS, right? And so that enables people that don't have smartphones to still participate on a blockchain technology from that perspective. And so it is definitely possible. Hisape has been a really shining example of how that's possible.
Amazing. So let's go back about this competition in the market. So how do you stand out? Like especially that a lot of applications, like talking about Telegram, talking about Bottom, other platforms and applications, they have this similar services that you're providing. So how do you compete with this busy market, and how do you make profit?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, if you look at it from an Algorand perspective, and which is we're a layer 1 blockchain, right? Our prerogative in life is really to ensure that our technology is set up in such a way that it's future-proofed and it's easy to use, and it's one of the most inviting environments in the world, right? Like that's our ongoing thing that we do day in and day out. I think from a competition perspective, we don't so much look at like the bottoms of the world as competition per se, but we do look at other layer 1 blockchains, right? And the beauty of how crypto or digital assets are evolving is that if you look at each one of these layer 1 blockchains, Solange, they all kind of specialize in a certain kind of way, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin, for example, it's a reserve, right? It's designed to be an asset that you hold on to, and that's always kind of how it was designed to be, and that's always how it's going to be, where people hold on to Bitcoins and they're going to wait for the value to go up or down, whatever, right? but it's still a reserve from that perspective. If you look at something like Ethereum, while people do buy and hold ETH, the Ethereum ecosystem is really designed for developers, right? It's like, it's all about like build, and layer 2s, now we have layer 3s and all these things that are building on top of that, right? Algorand has always been a chain that's built from an ecosystem perspective, really designed really well for payments, right? Like we are one of the most energy efficient, like to run our entire chain, it takes about the same energy as to charge a Tesla car, right? Which is very different than some other blockchains. We're a single layer 1 blockchain, which means that we don't have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3s, but we have very high efficiency in the sense we operate at 10,000 transactions per second, right? And it's instant finality. So it's not like you do a transaction and then you wait for maybe 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 minutes for finality. You get instant finality because our blocks get generated every 3 seconds. So from that perspective, like we're trying to make the ecosystem or the actual tech stack that Algorand is to be always the best and the most easiest for developers to use. Now, the good news is like, when it comes to working with other blockchains or looking at other blockchains, we're so nascent, right? This entire technology and the entire industry is so nascent from that perspective. Like it really would be horrible for us to think it's competition, but really we're all doing the same thing, which is we believe in this technology. We believe in the power that it has, and every one of us is trying to just approach it from a different perspective and get users to adopt it.
Luther, you're coming from this traditional finance business, and now you're working closely in this blockchain system and ecosystem. How do you promote your services? Like, I have the curiosity to understand how you do the promotion, the marketing to your services to get more users on board and to get the users to get them more familiar with your business and your services.
Absolutely. So one of the things, like, again, I think I want to go back to the fact that for us, users are both builders of applications and the people that use like the blockchain.
Daily use.
Yeah, daily usage, right? And so for the people that are the builders, we do a ton of like hackathons and things like that where we are actually inviting builders. And not only that, in Algorand actually does take a position if we find a project to be very interesting, we actually invest in that particular project. Or we do grants, right? Like just like most blockchains do. So from that perspective, we're always trying to attract builders because, I always view it like this, right? So if you can, there's 2 ways to fish, right? You can either get a bunch of fishing boats people that own fishing boats and send them go fishing, or you can go and try to go fish yourself, right?
Yes.
I think you would agree that the first way is probably the most economical way because you have other people working for you. I think we view it that way, that if we can get more developers to build more applications, then it's going to be better because that brings in more users. Now, having said that, even from a user perspective, like we've seen increasing growth with our USDC volumes. And the reason for that is because I think we have really good applications that are being built and they're bringing in a ton of good users. For example, like one of the amazing projects that's built on us is called Folks Finance, which gives people a really easy interface into using DeFi. But it doesn't really feel like DeFi, right? There's no like, it's very easy. Like it says like, oh, come in, like, you're able to lend. If you get X% of APY, you're able to like stake, you get X%. And so it makes it very simple for any layperson to leverage DeFi without actually having to know anything about DeFi.
Amazing. What's the future of Algorand payments? Like, it was known for its commitment to sustainability. So what are the unique features or the upcoming projects when it comes to Algorand's roadmap?
Yeah. So our uniqueness always resides in the fact that we have instant finality and atomic swaps and all these functions. So if you take something like Ethereum, for example, a lot of the functionality is built by other developers, right? Like the DEXs and all that stuff. In the case of Algorand, for example, we have that innately built into the architecture, right? Which enables us to then offer this to anybody without the risk of being dependent on a third-party program, right? So normally what happens in the case of blockchains and digital assets is that, or blockchains in general, somebody comes and builds a program, right? And that program, the environment of the blockchain itself doesn't dictate anything about how it's built, the security of it, etc., right? Because this is an open architecture, so that's the whole point of blockchains from that perspective. And so with Algorand, a lot of the key functionality around instant finality, atomic swaps is built into the core architecture of Algorand. So that means that it's always going to be secure. It's not something that people have to rely on for some other third party to build. So that's always going to be something that's going to be available in Algorand from that perspective. When it comes to like future projects, like we are going to continue to kind of push in the space of payments, right? Like that's kind of my job is to kind of focus on, as the head of payments, is
how many users do you have currently as we speak and on your platform?
We actually measure in the form of like transactions.
Transactions?
Right?
How many transactions
Yeah, so
on
we
daily
do about,
basis, let's say?
Yeah. So we do about like 65 transactions per second. That's our this thing, right? Yeah, per second, right? So we do quite a lot from that perspective. And we're not, I think this is no secret, like we're not the largest blockchain out there, we're not the smallest out there, we're somewhere in the middle. But our focus and my focus is going to continue to be that leverage. How do we get traditional payments companies to leverage the architecture and the technology that Algorand has to offer? Like that's going to be kind of like my focus on an ongoing basis. And I think this is across the board. It's not just like traditional payments companies, but there's a lot of like B2B payments companies, etc. And I think, for example, we're here in UAE. Like I think there's some really good use cases around, payment for oil or payment for, vendors to suppliers that are operating especially out of this geography right here, right? I think there's some really good use cases where digital assets like USDC on Algorand could solve for the speed of payments, could solve for not having to have letters of credit and like this large ecosystem that just operates on credit, right? I think it would solve for a lot of that, which ultimately means that the supplier gets paid faster, which means that they can pay their bills faster, which means that they can pay their employees faster. And that's what I'm focused on.
So you're kind of payment solution, or you're solving a certain problem. How do you see this supporting humanity? Where do you see your added value to humanity to different sectors, to different areas in
Absolutely.
people's life?
If you take, I'll give you like the traditional vendor supplier kind of ecosystem, right? So if you are if you're placing an order with me, I happen to be supplying some large farm equipment, for example. When you place an order with me, I actually will say, okay, that's great. Thank you for the order. I'm going to spend about 2 to 3 weeks of building this farm equipment, for example, right? And that's going to take X amount of time and resources and people and all these people. Like, right, I do that. So that's about 3 weeks. I ship it to you. That takes about 3 weeks to, for you to get it. And then you will eventually pay me maybe 60 or 90 days afterwards, right? So if you think about it, that's about like 6 months that money is stuck everywhere, which means that there's a lot of people that don't get paid, right? On time, or quickly, right? Yeah. And so this is like, and all those like delays are built into the system where the person who is getting paid just feels like, I just need to wait a month to get paid. Like it's normal, right? But what if they got paid faster, right? What does that actually mean for them? That possibly means that they probably don't have to get like some kind of payday loan. That possibly means that they can take care of stuff at home much faster and be able to like, live debt-free potentially, right? That's really where I'm focused on, is that by the introduction of digital assets on blockchains like Algorand, I really feel like by speeding up or just making that payment process faster, you actually enhance the lives of everybody that touches that entire process.
Interesting. So are you using any kind of like artificial intelligence, the support of social media to promote this, to make it more faster, feasible, more attractive to your users or the developers?
Yeah. So AI, like I would put AI to a side because I feel like there's a lot of good talking points around that. But where we try to focus on is more so on making sure that developers of applications are aware of how easy it is to build on Algorand, number one. Number two, how much support they can get from the Algorand Foundation, et cetera, in ensuring that their project is successful. And the way we evaluate that, like for example, our team, which is, we have a team that's focused just in India, and it has nothing to do with like the movement of stable assets or nothing to do with the actual crypto there. It's purely to do with enabling traditional, really, there's some programs in India that are being done for social work, etc., with the Seva program, etc., that's really targeted to social, economic, women's welfare, right? And so this is literally one program that's happening right now where when these women, they go through a process and they go to apply for loans, they literally have to gather all this documentation,
Yes.
right? And so there is an amazing project that's going on right now, leveraging the DigiLocker program that India has, and then leveraging Algorand blockchain on the back end to be able to tokenize all the different assets that they need to produce, and then not having to worry about, like, did I receive this? Everything is taken care of, and there are smart contracts that actually keep track of everything on the back end, right? So that's kind of where our focus is being able to like mesh in these amazing programs that are being developed in rural parts of the world like India, etc., and then being able to bring them on chain so that they do have true humanitarian impact.
Where do you see this digital payment industry going in the next 5-10 years down the line?
That's a really good question. You know, and I always tell people if I had the answer to that, I'd probably not be here. I'd be on a beach somewhere drinking.
Yeah.
You know, like, so yeah. Because I mean, I would know the future.
Like, I mean, everyone is talking about predictions, and what's your prediction regarding this industry, this ecosystem?
Yeah. I think there's from where we are from a digital asset perspective, I think payments themselves for crypto or digital assets, however you want to classify it, to become mainstream payments, I think it'll take some time, right? I'm super excited, however, in the adoption of blockchain technology by these amazing large ETFs like BlackRock with their BUIDL token, or if you look at Benjamin Franklin, who launched their Benji token, right? I think the adoption of blockchains and the tokenization of mutual funds and ETFs on chain by these ridiculously large financial institutions, that excites me a ton, because the moment you see adoption from that side, now you're starting to see where mainstream financial institutions are actually accepting the fact that this technology is useful. Not only is the technology useful and prevalent, but also tokenizing assets and being able to provide those assets globally makes a ton more sense than having some assets that are only limited by borders and bureaucracy. I think that's what excites me even more. And I see, because of the adoption there, I see that adoption like going much faster. I think there's a really cool prediction out there that says, I think by 2030, people are expecting almost $4 trillion or $5 trillion of tokenized assets, right? That's a big number, right? And we are only sitting at 200 billion right now. So there's so much ground to cover. And I think from that side, the predictions that are being made, I feel really strong that those predictions will hit.
Tell me about, what do you think about Dubai market in specific and UAE market in general, and how well educated people are and open to this adoption and using this kind of ecosystem, this industry in specific?
Yeah, I think you can always tell the acceptance of a technology or whatever it is from the way that like the government is engaging with it, right? You can always see it. And I think the fact that we have VARA, with literally the name being the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, which means that they are not only bought into the technology and the usage of it, but they've actually taken the next step, which is putting a specific organization or regulator who focuses on just that, right? Because traditionally what you see, even in Europe, you see like the traditional regulator being the one responsible for maybe carving out a portion of what they do to handling digital assets. But I love the approach from UAE, where they said, no, that's not the approach. Like, we're actually going to take a specific organization and make them specifically who are going to focus on this, who are going to be experts in this, and then be able to draft regulations about it. That's very clear. I also love the way that ADGM has accepted, because we've been in conversation with ADGM as well, and the way that they've set up their digital ledger technology association licenses, etc. Like, that makes a ton of sense, right? Because that's really what attracts foundations from outside to come and invest here and set up shop here. That's really what attracts exchanges and wallets to come shop here. So when you look at those two, like one onshore and one offshore regulator, I mean that is the clearest indication to anybody who's looking at the space to say that we are not only interested in this, but we're invested in this, right? So I love that aspect of it. And then when you look at the ecosystem as a whole here in UAE, I actually, one of the reasons I moved here is because of that, right? So I came here, so I grew up in Saudi Arabia till I was 15. And I left the region, hadn't come back for years, and then I finally made it back here in February of this year to actually have a conversation with Botim because they're a customer of MoneyGrams, etc. And what I quickly realized is that the amount of conversations, energy, just the harmonization of how much people are accepting of digital assets, and it's an everyday conversation, right? Like, I mean, I was joking to a friend, you can go to a different networking event every day and not see the same people here in UAE.
Yes.
And it's a really small market, right? And where I'm from in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US,
very small and very competitive and very supportive market.
very supportive, right? Very supportive, and people are not just skimming the surface. Like, you meet a lot of people that know very detailed, like from a tech perspective, what's happening in different blockchains, like what's happening in the tokenization of assets, how regulators are viewing it, how adoption is growing, and how there's some interesting projects that I've heard of, like where tokenization of land deeds in the UAE, etc. And I think just hearing those things and knowing that the framework is already set up for it makes this probably one of the best places to come set up shop.
Amazing. So for those who are interested in exploring the blockchain but may feel overwhelmed, unsure, shy to start, what are your recommendations, your advice, from where to start exactly, and what are the steps to take, and how to educate themselves on this to succeed in this world?
Absolutely. I think there's always a aspect of fearing the unknown, right? That's always going to be there. So that's always going to be there. I mean, even I remember walking into a bank and feeling what are they going to ask me? You always have that fear of what is going to happen. But I think the easiest thing to really do from an education perspective is, go onto the Algorand website. There's tons of education that people can kind of follow from that perspective on how easy it is to get a wallet, how easy it is to actually get your first algo tokens, right? Or how to send money cross-border to your friend or your family using one of the wallets. And I think from that perspective, all the blockchains have done a really good job of making the access to knowledge very simple and making the knowledge very simple to kind of read and follow as well. I'll be honest with you, I tell this to everybody that ever asks me, YouTube is your friend. YouTube is a great place to actually get some amazing information. And from that perspective, I've learned quite a bit as well from that side. But ultimately, if there is a project that you're interested in, do some research in the project, and it's usually that project is built on a blockchain, and I promise you that particular blockchain has amazing information on how to get involved from that perspective. And and your involvement as a user can be just from a investment perspective. It could be just from a utility perspective. It doesn't really matter how and why you're coming into the space, but trust that this is definitely, blockchain is here to stay. The technology is going to be more and more prevalent. With the adoption by large financial institutions like BlackRock, et cetera, it's just going to be more and more prevalent. So I think it behooves everybody to kind of educate themselves and then just be a great participant in this ecosystem.
Who do you follow on social media?
That's a tough one.
Who's your mentor, your inspiration?
I love the gentleman from Chainalysis, and I think there's some really good names out there, right? So there's a bunch of people that I generally follow, but I think in general, there's from an Algorand perspective, like John Wood on our side, our CTO, he does some really good podcasts and put some really good material out there, which enables you to kind of understand about Algorand in specific. I'm trying to think. I'm definitely drawing a blank, but yeah, I mean, there's some really good names out there that you can educate yourself on. But yeah.
Amazing. So during your time at MoneyGram, you explored stablecoins, and you had partnerships with Stellar, let's mention one of them in various networks. So how do you see, or how do you view the role of stablecoins and CBDC in this global ecosystem and industry? How do you see the importance?
It's a good question, Solange, because as we discussed earlier, there's different type of digital assets, right? There's investment assets, there's assets that are really designed from a utility perspective, and then there's, of course, there's the original RWAs, or the original real-world asset tokenization, which is stablecoins, right? And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that while all assets can be moved on chain very simply and easily, at the end of the day, stablecoins meet a very specific purpose from a cross-border money movement perspective. Because when you have to move an asset from one side of the world to the other side of the world, you have to have one thing that's constant, right? You can't have an asset that is fluctuating in value and you have an FX rate that's also fluctuating in value. Like, it makes it really hard to hit two targets at the same time. And that's actually where stablecoins make cross-border money movement in general much easier, because the stable asset, if it really doesn't matter if it's a US dollar stablecoin or a euro stablecoin. The fact that it's a stablecoin and the fact that when you're actually moving it cross-border, its value is not changing, right? It's always going to be pegged to the original currency that it's pegged to. That makes it a lot easier for cross-border money, just trade and finance in general. And that's really the biggest thing that stablecoins offer. And that's, like, if you see the biggest adoption in this space, that's where you see stablecoins being used, which is for payments and like trade finance.
So what's next after MoneyGram, Algorand? What are you planning to do next on professional level? What projects and developments you can share with our audience?
Sure. I mean, this is my third week at Algorand, so I haven't made any plans.
Still okay.
Yes. So I hope to be here for quite a while. Algorand is doing some amazing things, and I'd love to be part of the things that they're doing from that perspective. But, I think my goal, if you kind of follow the trajectory of my career, it's gone from traditional finance or just merchant services to cross-border money movement to using.
How much being in this traditional finance, it shaped your career and it shaped you on professional level?
Quite a bit, actually.
Yeah. Do you see this is the base? This is the base where to start, or the?
I would say this. I have spoken to a lot of just crypto projects and digital asset or DeFi projects, and I think having a base understanding, a very basic understanding of how settlement works, the settlement of funds, whether it's within just in one country or cross-border, it doesn't really matter from that perspective. Like, having a basic understanding of how settlement of funds works makes a big difference in your understanding of what is possible, what is not possible from a digital asset perspective. Because at the end of the day, you have to understand that while digital assets themselves are moving on-chain, on a particular blockchain, it doesn't really matter what blockchain it is, they are moving 24/7, great. They are moving maybe very cheap, great. But at the end of the day, either they have to be converted from a traditional asset to a digital asset, or they have to be converted from a digital asset to a traditional asset, right? And knowing that how those on and off ramps actually work and what their limitations are makes a big difference in understanding what the full ecosystem has to offer, right? And so I feel like my background, and I've met several others that have made the transition from the TradFi space to the DeFi space, and I really feel like having a good understanding, or just a basic understanding of how settlements and cross-border money movement works in general, really helps you develop much better applications in the DeFi space.
Interesting. Luther, at CoinGape TV, we always promote crypto entrepreneurs and we educate people about crypto. So what's your one piece of advice to our audience and to our team?
Absolutely. I think, I work with several startups and I'm an advisor for one. And the key thing to really always remember is that even though it looks amazing on paper and the code works, doesn't mean it's immediately going to pick up traction from the user base, right? And I always advise people don't think about putting a bunch of features into your application. Have the conversation with your customer, do a focus group, understand what exactly they need, and build just that for your initial phase, right? I think that saves so much time and effort versus building what you think the customer needs and that not being the actual thing, because you haven't done the time to actually understand what they need.
Amazing. Luther Maday, it was amazing having you on this interview, exclusive interview to Congape TV.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate all the insights and all the information that you shared with me today and with our audience. Follow us with more and more topics and more guests in this episode, in this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sloan.
Thank you. Yes.